This is Robert Polenick, the owner of Brutal Iron Gym, coming at you for video number 3 of the Ask Rob series. So today what we're going to discuss is a diet scheme, a diet strategy. You can use it for weight loss, really is what I've been using it for with clients. The diet is actually called the Carb Fat Rule Diet. So Carb Fat Rule Diet. And the reason why is what's really important in the diet is how you consume your carbs and your fats. So there's rules on how to eat them. So this is an intermediate style diet. So what that means is it's not something I've used with beginner clients, and some clients who have more advanced goals, like trying to get on stage doing bodybuilding and some other physique shows. We'll have some different strategies that might be a little more efficient. But this diet works for pretty well for the average person. I actually have used it for dozens of clients that have lost over 30 pounds. So we actually used it this year for one of my trainers who worked for me. We did a physique competition together, and I used it for him, and it actually worked out really well. He ended up getting down to having a really nice six-pack, so he looked good, pretty good doing it. So I want to talk about today about how to use this diet strategy for your own purposes and how you can apply it to your own lives. So especially with the holiday season coming up, everybody kind of tends to gain a couple extra pounds. So this is something you can use right now until Christmas, or you can start using it in January for when you make your New Year's resolutions. So, but again, the diet is called the Carb Fat Rule Diet. Again, it's for intermediates, and the whole reason why we use this diet is it allows people to eat carbs and it allows them to eat fat. So it's not really a low carb diet, it's not a low fat diet. You simply just can't eat those nutrients together. So carbs and fat, I refer to them as energy nutrients. So both of them are nutrients that we use to eat to get energy. So if we tend to overconsume both of them in one meal, you end up taking in a lot more energy than what you'd actually use, and that excess energy intake leads to body fat formation. So if you don't use the energy, you tend to get fat. So by trying not to overlap the intake of carbs or fat at the same meal, it decreases the likelihood of you having excess energy intake from that one single meal. So I have a little cheat sheet with me today, so I'm going to look down through it. But like I said, it's not a low carb, not a low fat diet, and it is used for people who have different types of preferences between foods. So instead of having somebody who prefers all carbs and trying to put them on a low carb diet, which would be miserable, or somebody who prefers to eat fat foods, so foods that contain high amounts of fat, and we try to put them on a low fat diet, they would be pretty miserable as well. So this diet is used to allow people to eat whatever kind of foods they already kind of like. We just have to eat those foods following a couple different rules. So the main 4 rules is number 1 is you have to identify the foods you eat. So if we can't overlap fats and carbs in the same meal, we have to actually identify which foods are fats, which foods are carbs, so we're not eating them at the same meal. And then the other nutrient is protein. So that's kind of the first thing we have to do, is we have to identify the foods we eat, which nutrient category they would fall under. So the second rule is every meal has to contain protein. So protein does a lot of good stuff in our body, and it just helps kind of keep a leaner physique, a lot less water retention, and there's a lot of other benefits as well. So rule number 3 is every meal has to contain either a carb or a fat, but you can't contain both. So at each meal you definitely have to have a protein, and then you have either a fat or a carb. So, and then the last rule is eat as needed. So you're going to eat your foods to match your activity level. So those are the 4 main rules. So now we'll kind of go through and give you a little more details about the rules. So the first one is identifying the foods you eat by what nutrient category they fall into. And really the only way to do that is to start figuring out nutrition labels. So you're going to have to check the nutrition label for each food item. So you can either check if you buy the food item and it actually has a nutrition label on it, then you can just read the nutrition label to find out the information. Or you can search through the internet. They have a lot of different websites you can search for nutrition fact labels. So one website I use is Nutrition Data, nutritiondata.com, nutritiondata.com. And the reason why I like that website is it's very inclusive. It has almost every food you can think of, and it has a search function at the top right part of the page. So if you go to nutritiondata.com, at the top right you can use a search function to search for the food you eat, and it'll bring up the nutrition fact label for that food. So when we try to identify which foods fall into which categories, basically you're going to look at the nutrition fact label and you're going to find out which of the 3 nutrients, either fats, carbs, or proteins, which of the three nutrients occurs the most in that food. So if you think about one food item, for example, say chicken breast, or like a lean meat, it might have a little bit of fat in it. Say for 4 ounces of lean meat, it might have 2 grams of fat, maybe about 22 to 24 grams of protein. So, and there'll be no carbs in it if it's a clean meat source, so if it doesn't have any sauces on it or anything like that. So, but if there's 2 grams of fat and there's 24 grams of protein, then it's definitely a protein item, so we would label that under the protein category. So the majority of the calories coming from that food are from protein, so we put it under the protein label. Another food item, for example, is peanut butter. So peanut butter actually contains all 3 nutrients. It has fats in it, it has carbs in it, it has proteins. But out of all 3 nutrients, the greatest contributing nutrient is fat. So it has the most amount of calories coming from fat compared to carbohydrates or proteins. So peanut butter would be classified as a fat food source. So that's what you're going to have to do, is kind of go through the foods you already eat or the foods you like to eat and kind of figure out what nutrient category they fall into. This does require a little bit of work, and that's why I classify this as an intermediate diet. So whenever somebody hires me, I do the work for them. I actually look up all the foods they tend to already eat and tell them what categories they fall into. So if you're doing this on your own, you have to do that work. But it's worth it. If you take a little bit of time, you tend to learn really quickly. So like I said, in 4 ounces of lean meat, there's about 2 grams of fat, 0 grams of carbs, about 22 to 24 grams of protein. And I know that simply from looking it up about 4 million times. So the more you look it up, the more you're going to learn. So, but it's just time investment, and it's a very good investment. So then what you do is, if you look up a food item and say that it has 2 nutrients that provide pretty much the same amount of calories, or are pretty equivalent, like they're both significant. For example, whole eggs. So if you eat a whole egg, there's fat from the yolk, and then there's protein from the white part. So you can't really classify it as a protein-only source because the fats are in there, and you can't classify it as a fat-only source because of the protein. So that's kind of a mixed source. So what we would do with that is we actually label it as both. So whole eggs would be classified as both a fat and a protein source food. So whenever you have nutrients like that that are pretty similar, you just put them under both categories. And so if there is a food item, for example, that contains a lot of fats and a lot of carbs, example of that might be, say, cheesecake. So it has a lot of fats, has a lot of sugars. So those foods, since they're both energy nutrients, fats and carbs, if you eat those, you're probably going to get pretty fat pretty quick. So you want to try to eliminate or greatly reduce foods that have both fats and carbs in the exact same in the same food. So you want to reduce those. And again, if you go back to the rules of this diet, one of the 4 rules is not mixing carbs or fats in the same meal. So if you're eating a food source that has both in the same meal, that automatically violates that rule. So you want to kind of eliminate or reduce those foods. So if you do have a food item, say such as whole eggs, which is a protein in one of the energy nutrients, so protein and fat, for example, in the whole eggs, then you would just classify it as both. And if you're going to eat the eggs with another food item, you would pair it with another item that has fats or proteins in it. So you would not pair that food item with a carb, because then you'd be mixing carbs and fats in the same meal. So again, this might seem complex, but you're always welcome to send me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com, or you can visit our website, www.brutalirongym.com. You can send me an email directly from there, and I don't mind helping you out if you have a few questions here or there. So the second rule is that every meal must contain protein, and again, the reason why is that protein does a lot of good things in our body. It really helps a lot of the processes, so you want to make sure you have enough in there. And the third rule is that we already talked about a few times here, is you can't mix carbs and fats. So again, if you tend to do that, you tend to gain weight pretty quickly. Then the last meal is eating as needed. So whenever I have a client who's getting ready for a, say, physique competition, like the gentleman I helped, what we do is we actually tell them exactly how many calories to eat. However, you won't really know that. So what you want to do is just kind of eat to match your activity level. So if you're eating, if you're a bit more busy during the day, and that's your most active period, you actually want to try to eat more foods at that time. So what tends to happen for people is they get busy during the day, they forget to eat, and then when they go home and sit on their butt and they're doing nothing, they tend to overeat. So you want to eat to actually match your activity level. So when you're more busy, you eat more. When you're less busy, you eat less. So what that means for most people, and it's not everybody, but for most people, they need to eat more during the day and a little less at night right before they go to bed. So if you think about it, food really is energy. It's putting fuel in your body. So if you're sitting on your butt and you're about to go to bed in 30, 40 minutes, you really don't need to put fuel in there. So you're not going to be running the body, you're not going to be doing anything with it, so it won't really need the fuel. So try to think of it as that way. You're fueling a car, so you need gas in the car when the car is moving. You don't really need gas in the car when the car is sitting still. So try to think of your body the same way. You put food in when you're moving, and you don't really put food in when you're sitting on your butt. So that will really help a lot. So again, this diet strategy, if you could comprehend everything I just spilt through there real quickly, it just does help you lose a good bit of weight. So like I said, I've helped a lot of people lose over 30 pounds actually with just this scheme without making any other changes whatsoever. So again, just the real quick rules are identify what the largest contributing nutrient is of a food. So you want to label it as fats, carbs, or protein. At every meal you want to have a protein source. At every meal you want to have either a fat or a carb source, but not both. And then you eat to match your activity level. So if you do those 4 things, it's going to help you lose a lot of weight. So like I said, you can try to throw them into place right now, practice with it before Christmas, and then after you splurge on Christmas, you can kind of kick this diet into gear starting in January, and that'll help you lose all that excess holiday weight. So again, if you have questions or comments or any information you want to know, just check out our website, www.brutalirongym.com, and you can email me directly from there. If you're on the world of Facebook, you can check us out at Brutal Iron Gym. We have a Facebook page, and I will post this video on the Facebook page, and it's also on YouTube. So if you end up watching the video on Facebook, please click like. The more people that click like, it just gives more exposure to more people on Facebook about the videos, and it helps broaden the exposure of the gym. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Hopefully you guys find all this information helpful. Okay, thank you.